Hi, on this video we're going to be talking about triangular shawls, top down or bottom up. So we're going to be looking at these two construction methods and looking at the pros and cons of each. So we're going to start with the bottom up construction. So in this type of construction, you are casting on all the stitches that you need for your shawl and then decreasing on one side so that you end up with very little stitches, usually 2 or 3. For example, with this shawl here, you start off with all the stitches and you decrease right up to the top. So this is a swatch that I did for my gratitude attitude shawl, and this was worked from the bottom up. So what are the pros and cons of bottom up construction? So with this type of construction, it is very easy to follow, to work. Even an advanced beginner can work on this pattern because you're starting off with all the stitches. So you have an established pattern that you're working with, and as you do your decreases, you can actually see what's happening with your work. You're not creating new stitches that have to fit into the pattern that you have in mind. So it's a much easier construction method that you can do. It's actually quite mindless at a certain point, particularly when you're still working on the side, which usually most shawls have either got garter stitch or some other simpler pattern on the side. So you're just working mindlessly and doing your decreases there. And the other advantage that you have with this type of construction is that you get most of the work done at the beginning of the project, and as you go further it actually gets shorter and quicker. So what you'll notice is that mostly we are more excited about the project at the beginning than towards the end. So with this type of construction, you get most of the work done at the whilst you're still very fired up and excited about the project. So, and as you get towards the end, it moves very fast, and when you towards the tip of your project. And then the last advantage that I have is that you can easily incorporate more complicated stitch patterns that will be very difficult for less advanced knitters to execute. So you can have very complicated stitch work throughout your entire shawl, but still be able to write a simple, uncomplicated pattern that can easily be followed because of the established pattern that you start off with and you decrease in pattern. So those are the advantages. The disadvantages of this type of construction is that you do not have much control over the size that you're going to end up with. So once you've cast on the recommended number of stitches, you will definitely be ending up with a size that's approximately the same as that of the designer of the pattern. So the size cannot be adapted once you've started working on it. And the other disadvantage is that you have no control over the amount of yarn that you will use. So if you are working on the pattern, you need to have enough yarn to get right to the top, because the worst thing that could happen is if you run out of yarn somewhere here and you've got this shape, you can't even wear this as a shawl. So that's the disadvantage that you may have with this type of construction. It's the lack of control over the size and the amount of yarn that you're going to need. So that's what I have to say about the bottom up construction. And then you have the top down construction, whereby you start off with a number of stitches and you keep on growing your shawl, and you can make it as big as possible. So with this type of construction, the advantage that you have is that you have control over the amount of yarn that you use. So you can make this as big as you want it to be, or as small as you can manage to do. So this construction also works very well for one skein shawls. So with one skein projects, you want to make sure that when you're about to run out of yarn, you can bind off and end your project there. So I did this type of construction method for the autumn shawlette. I don't have it here with me, but I'm going to insert a photo right here so you can see it. So with the shawl, you cast on a minimum number of stitches and you keep working until you run out of yarn. So with this type of construction, one skein shawls are easy to work because you are not worried about running out before you finish. Because remember, with most one skein projects, it's very difficult. Even if the designer has given you the guidelines and everything, not all skeins are the same size, or you've got the same yardage, or our tension is the same when we're knitting. So you want to have that kind of control so that when you are running out of yarn, you can bind off at any point. So that's the advantage of a top-down construction, where you're starting with the least number of stitches and increasing all the way to the top. And the other one, as I've mentioned, is you have control over the size. So if you want your shawl to be much smaller or to be as large as you can make it, because some of us are taller, others are shorter, so it depends on the size that you want to work on. So if you want it to be a very big size, you can keep on working as long as you've got enough yarn. So that's the other advantage of a top-down construction. And the disadvantage that you have is that the pattern writing tends to be very complicated. So if you're in a beginner knitter or even an advanced beginner, you might have problems with some of the designs because they'll be more complicated in terms of writing. So for example, I've got this Fezeka Shawl. It was also worked from the top down. So when I was working on the instructions, I started from this point. So you'll discover that you have different sections of instructions on this pattern, unlike with a bottom-up construction, which I also have here, which is much easier. So with the top-down construction, you have instructions from here until you establish the first cable, and then you'll have instructions that will show you how to increase up to the last cable here. So you'll be repeating the same instructions as you get up to the last cable. And then there'll be instructions, a set of instructions written to incorporate the first repeat of this garter stripe pattern. And then there will be instructions also for the entire section of the body up to the point where you are done with the pattern. And then there's the bottom border here, and in this case I did 1 by 1 ribbing. So there are different sections that you'll be working on, and for a less experienced knitter, that may seem a bit complicated, but basically that's the only disadvantage that I could think of with this type of construction. And I think it's also limiting when it comes to more complicated stitch patterns, because you may visualize them as the designer, but it may be more difficult for someone else to visualize the next step or the next point that they are building up to, particularly if they are yarn overs and if there is lace, yarn overs and knit two togethers. So you just have to make sure that it's well balanced, so that you don't end up adding less or more stitches at that point. So it's mainly the difficulty, I think, in execution. But for a more advanced knitter, that is not a problem at all. For someone who's been knitting shawls for a long time, that's not a problem at all. So the other example that I showed briefly was this shawl that's worked from the bottom up. It's called the Lustrous Shawl. So I worked this one from the bottom up. It would have been very difficult to work from the top down, but this was in the book Confident Knitting, and the focus on this particular stitch was reversible cables. So I didn't want to write a pattern that was going to be a bit more complicated for someone who just wants to learn how to do cables. So I took away the pressure for doing a more complicated shawl and to just focus on the cables themselves. When you're working from the bottom up, your decreases all the way to this point. Okay, let me hold it up. All the way to this point are going to be on the garter stitch section. So you're going to be working your cables normally. So if you're someone who's learning how to do your cabling, it's very easy to just focus on the cables without worrying about what's happening with the shaping, because you're only decreasing the garter stitch section. So the ease of working the pattern was the focus on this one, and why I wrote it in that way, so that as you're focusing on learning how to work reversible cables, you are not worried about the pattern on the side or how it's building up and how it's shaping. So those are the pros and cons of the two different construction methods. So I hope this video is going to help you to be able to choose the ideal pattern for you for any particular circumstance or any yarn that you're working on, so that you can get the best experience in your shawl knitting. Thank you so much for watching. Bye bye.